What is going on, you guys? So, I just recently finished my read-throughs of both books, and I wanted to put out an update to discuss my findings and how they may or may not affect everything as we move forward into actually writing Wonderhaven. First and foremost, though, I want to express to you that this entire process has made me quite nervous. Mostly due to the realization that if I did come across any major continuity issues, that would mean that I would have to take Wonderhaven back to the drawing board and essentially rethink everything that I had planned. Thankfully, though, I can't say that I stumbled onto anything that would suggest that it wouldn't fit nicely at the beginning of the timeline as written, which is a huge weight off my shoulders and definitely a blessing. Coincidentally, everything that I did take note of, all the minor things that I did make notes about, all seem to pertain to or revolve around the Crystal Rose, which, truth be told, was kind of expected, because that is what Wonderhaven is all about. The Crystal Rose and the events leading up to its creation and all of those sorts of things. So to realize and come across that those things need to be tweaked a little bit really wasn't all that shocking or surprising for me. But I think as far as those things are concerned, perhaps rewrite or rethink is the wrong verbiage to use. I think it's more about just expanding on the ideas that already exist and elaborating on them in greater detail, which is exactly what I want to do with you today. So if you are somebody that isn't all caught up on your Alan lore, I suggest you buy the books and get caught up. Otherwise, you're going to be extremely confused and have no idea what we're talking about. But the first thing that I have starred in my notes here oh, yeah. The part in the book where White is explaining the lore behind the Crystal Rose. She basically says that Wonderhaven is guarded by, or has been guarded by, the royal family of Wonderland for generations. Now, I don't want to spoil too much. I'm going to try and keep things very vague, just because I want to keep things kind of a surprise. But I will just say very briefly that it's not really generations. I think the way that it's written suggests that the royal family has been in charge of Wonderland for centuries, and that's simply not the case. the idea that I'm kind of working with is that it all kind of starts with White's grandfather, who is going to be the first king of Wonderland. Which there's a whole big story that goes behind that I won't get into. But yeah, so we got a solid generation or two there, and which kind of gets rid of the whole idea that it's been that way for, potentially thousands of years. And I'm not really sure how or why the royal family gets guardianship over Wonderhaven. The way that it kind of works in my mind is that maybe it's just kind of the perk of being the royal family, being that they are the only ones that get that kind of a privilege, because a normal Wonderlander doesn't have that kind of access. To them, it's nothing more than a myth or a legend. A place that you go when you die, but no living person that isn't part of the royal family has seen it with their own two eyes. So I think more or less it's just kind of a perk of being part of the royal family. But yeah, so there's a little bit of a tweak there. The next thing that I have wrote down is that also within that kind of lore story, White explains to Alan that basically her father created the Crystal Rose as kind of an emergency fallback plan. It's basically to be used on a rainy day when there are no other options, to be used and only when the kingdom really needs it. And it says that he is the one that put it in Wonderhaven for safekeeping. And what I have written here is that it says, due to the urgency of events, White will hide the rose in Wonderhaven. Essentially, what I'm working with there is that the events that cause the Crystal Rose to be created happen relatively quickly. There is a pretty big sense of urgency of being like, oh my god, this is happening. So essentially because of that, the king's not going to have any time to find a place to hide it for safekeeping. He's not going to have the time to put it in Wonderhaven. So the idea that I kind of have is that after White sees what the Crystal Rose can do firsthand, she goes, boy, this really isn't a good thing to have out in the open. And she's the one that puts it in Wonderhaven as a safe place. Only after coming to realize firsthand exactly what the Crystal Rose is and what it does. So she's the one that will put it there. Let's see here. Oh, next we have so in the part of the book where the place between is introduced. The real door to Wonderhaven is located where the royal family is to be is buried, essentially. It's a mural of both the king and queen and Red. Alan puts the white rose necklace in the spot where it goes. It opens up, and that's the real door to Wonderhaven. But an aesthetic choice that I decided to go with to kind of pair with the idea of this giant stone wall mural is that there are coffins for the royal family. There's one that looks like Red, there's one that looks like their father, and one that looks like their mother. Essentially, they just, these coffins are, I don't know really what the correct terminology is. Sarcophagus? I don't know. Coffins, for lack of a better word, basically represent the people that are supposed to be inside of them. The only hang-up with that is that if the crystal rose works as it's supposed to, which, take it from me, it does, then there would be nothing left of the parents to bury. Essentially, the crystal rose would turn them to dust, and there would be no physical remains for her to put in the coffins. Red's a different story because Alan runs her through with the Vorpal blade, and White could take her body, place it in the place between, and bury her there. So obviously there's not going to be anything to fill those coffins of her parents with. And the idea that I have there is that, maybe it's more or less of just a nice place for the family to be together, and even though those coffins are empty, it's just kind of a memorial or a sign of respect that the family is together. But that's something that kind of got overlooked, I guess. But it should be relatively easy to fix as I go. The next things is, of course, about the trials that Alan has to pass to prove that he is pure enough to handle, to claim the crystal rose. And it says Alan must pass 3 tests to claim the rose, not being of royal blood. And yeah, that's exactly the way it's explained in the book, is that anybody that isn't the royal family has to prove themselves to the crystal rose. But as I read that part, I was kind of thinking, that maybe what that really means is anybody but white has to take those tests. Essentially, not just anybody that isn't part of the royal family. And what I mean by that is, by that way of thinking, that definition, the Red Queen and the Black Royalty are technically part of the royal family, meaning that if they ever got past the White Queen, killed her, whatever the case is, they could just walk through Wonderhaven, walk straight into Wonderhaven, and take it. The interesting part of that to think about is that very obviously the Red Queen and the Black Royalty aren't going to be pure of heart at that time. So I think a little bit of clarification as to what those tests are for. Maybe white put them in place as an extra precaution, just in case her sister made it that far, just in case the Black Royalty made it that far, or whatever the case is. If whoever the antagonist is in question got the better of her, maybe those tests are just an extra formality, because obviously they're not going to pass. So I don't know, that's just something to think about. I think there was one more thing that I wanted to share with you. Oh, yeah, in the chapter where Duchess transformed into her huge, hideous beast thing. It's, the way that it's presented in the chapter is that Alan has secured the crystal rose, brought it out of Wonderhaven and into the place between, and the Duchess wants the power to give her and her son a better life. Essentially, she gets the idea that the crystal rose is going to help her, if she can procure it. The crystal rose is going to help her undo everything that Red did to ruin their lives and just make everything better. And what I have written here is that Duchess doesn't know the truth of the crystal rose, meaning, basically what the true power of it is and what it means. Even though she will hear it from the king himself. Essentially, that means that she will be part of the crystal rose, not necessarily part of the rose's creation itself, but she will be there at its beginning. She will be part of that initial meeting where the king explains, what's happening, and that he created this weapon and plans to use it, and blah, blah, blah. So she, of course, will know exactly what the crystal rose is and what it does to the people that use it. So I kind of started to ponder that a little bit, and the more I read, I found a part, because I was like, how do I work around that? How do I have her be a part of the Crystal Rose's beginning and then all of a sudden act like she doesn't know anything about it? And the more I read, I came across this little part where Alan says that basically Red's curse had twisted the mindsets of once good people. So the other part of what I wrote in my notes is that maybe she's blinded by Red's curse and just kind of forgot. Because we really don't know what Red's curse could do to her mindset and her thought process. And, you know, she's been locked up for God knows how long, because she's an animal, essentially. Her and her child have become monsters and have been caged up like animals. So maybe it all just drove her to madness, and she views the Crystal Rose as the only source of power that can set things right in her mind. And she's desperate for her life to change. She's desperate to get out and get back to her world and her life. Because, like I said, maybe has just been isolated for so long that it just drove her mad, and she's completely disregarding everything that she knows about the Crystal Rose. So that should be easy enough to work with. But if my read through of the books, specifically the Crystal Rose, has kind of taught me anything, it's that the way things are written in the Crystal Rose, you are forced into a very specific perception of things. The angles on which you can examine situations are very limited. What I mean by that is everything is done through Alan, and it's all about how these things are presented to him and his understanding of those things. And you, as the reader, have to take everything at face value, because this is the first time that you're being introduced to some of these characters and some of these conflicts that very obviously expand beyond this story itself. It's obvious that it all runs much, much deeper than just the one story. So essentially what I'm hoping Wonderhaven will do is give you those missing angles to look at things. I'm hoping it will illuminate the parts of the overall situations that you couldn't see before, so that you will get the whole picture. Essentially, kind of running with the mindset that, okay, it's this, but it's also this. So, like, not everything is exactly what it seems, and there's always more to it. I think the best example that I could give of that is exactly what I just did, running you through certain situations and kind of giving further explanation to things as they are. Might change them a little bit, might tweak them a little bit, but I think explanations like the ones I just gave give you a much broader understanding of what's going on. But I guess if you need another example, we can use the Black Royalty. Essentially, their entire motivation for their conflict in the Crystal Rose is that they have been forced into the feud between the White Queen and Red Queen, which kind of put, with how everything played out and how everything ended up, put a real stain on the royal family. And the Black Royalty, the only way that they feel they can remedy this and make it right is to take the throne away from White, because obviously she couldn't handle it correctly, or she didn't handle it correctly. So they feel as though they are obligated to take it from her, basically wipe the slate clean, wipe her from existence, and take control of everything and rule it the quote-unquote right way. Essentially, they feel as though her father made the wrong decisions, and if he had made the right ones, the girls wouldn't have a throne to fight over. One of them wouldn't have ended up dead, and the Black Royalty as a whole wouldn't have had to step in. That is the face value of that conflict. But Wonderhaven is going to take you back and show you the genesis of everything, so that, as far as Alan is concerned, that is why. But there's also this situation in the prequel that is kind of an ulterior motive or an alternate motivation. And if you were to read them all in order, starting with Wonderhaven, you can see that situation as a whole, and you can understand it, so that when you get to Crystal Rose, again, you can be like, oh, it's written and presented this way because Alan can't see what's really behind the veil because he wasn't there at the beginning to experience what kind of set everything in motion and what the motivations truly are. But you as the reader can. So all it's going to do is just kind of set everything in motion, explain how everything's connected, and give you a much clearer picture of what the little saga is as a whole. Essentially, I guess in layman's terms, I've been keeping secrets about the saga hidden behind the angles you can't see. So that you could get to them in a prequel. You know, I guess I've had things planned that I didn't want to give away too early, and Wonderhaven is my chance to kind of blow the doors off everything and go, here it is. And that's really what I hope Wonderhaven does correctly, is just kind of pull back the curtain and allow you to see how it all fits together as one cohesive story. But I guess the biggest piece of lore that needs tweaking is the Crystal Rose itself. Its power level. And kind of its functionality within Wonderland. The way it is presented in the book is that it's kind of an end-all be-all weapon. Basically, it annihilates everything from existence, turns the entirety of the map to ash, where the new Wonderland will be reborn from and flourish. But essentially, this weapon causes the entirety of his existence to cease and give way to this new rebirth, if you will. And on the basic level, I like that idea. I like the idea of that kind of annihilation and rebirth into something new. And it's something that I will continue to run with and work with and expand upon. But I think I need to tweak it, or at least elaborate on exactly what its power does. Because obviously, if I'm gonna have characters like the Duchess and the Black Royalty be in a prequel, that means that they have to survive its first use. Essentially, they have to survive the initial event that causes the king to die and, White to be crowned queen. meaning that they need characters like the Duchess and the Black Royalty need to be kept safe and out of range of the initial blast. So I think what I need to elaborate on is that it's not, the Crystal Rose isn't going to necessarily be a Thanos snap where literally everyone and everything vanishes. I'm looking more at it as sort of an atom bomb type thing, where it's got a set radius. Obviously, the battlefield and kind of everywhere nearby the Throne of Wonderland is going to be annihilated when it's used, right? That is where the rebirth in the new Wonderland will always start. That is where those type of events take place. But it's not going to travel all the way across the desert, over the Looking Glass Mountain, and to Hatter's house, for example, and annihilate him on that side of the map and kill off all of those characters. Same as how it's not going to travel all the way through the Duchess's castle and the Kingdom of Blacksuit and annihilate all those characters on that side of the map. So the idea is that the initial blast will be very concentrated, and yes, it will still be devastating. It will still completely erase the castle, the soldiers, literally everybody within a close vicinity. And I guess from the Duchess's and the Black Royalty's point of view, they will definitely be able to see it. You know, this big, bright mushroom cloud spreading, you know, across the initial radius. But they're not going to be negatively affected by it. And they'll essentially be able to survive and walk away from it. And I think that's the biggest tweak I need to make. I think I wrote it the way that I did in the Crystal Rose, just to be this kind of end-all, be-all weapon. Number one, because I really wasn't planning at the time to go back in time and establish an entire story of lore from past events. But I think the idea of the Crystal Rose being as devastating as it is added to the drama for Alan, and it just kind of raised the stakes for everything that he's going through. But obviously to have a prequel that is centered around the Crystal Rose's creation and the inaugural use, it's got to be toned down. So it might not be, it's still going to be devastating, I think, definitely, because I liked that. If I didn't like that or want to use that, I wouldn't have come up with the idea and used it the way that I did. But it's not going to be so devastating that you're not able to answer, well, how did these characters survive? How did they escape a light that is supposed to be unstoppable. The only answer that I could come up with, the only fix that I had, is to say that, you know, its power level has been altered, it's been nerfed, and the blast itself just won't reach that far. So yeah, I guess that's what I've learned. That's kind of where my mindset is. That's where my imagination is headed. For Wonderhaven, I hope I didn't spoil too much or take too much away from the writing process itself. But I'm feeling fairly confident that I'll be able to start soon. If everything goes right, probably as soon as next week, probably Monday. And I just hope you're excited about it. You know, I'm always excited about this part because this is where I get to write regular posts about kind of how my experience is going and clue you guys into different creatures and settings and stuff that I'm working with, just to get your excitement building and stuff. And I hope that this video and everything that I touch base on won't take away from that very much. I hope I didn't ruin anything. I just wanted to create a clear picture of what the prequel was going to be. What you know, kind of blowing the doors off everything and showing you the beginning of it all, so that you can see, you know, the little saga as a whole. And I hope that from here you're also able to see where we can go in terms of the future, right? And yeah, I guess the whole mantra of it is to understand the end, we have to go back to the beginning. That's just something that from the very beginning, when I started to come up with the idea, has stuck with me, and that's really what has been driving my heart in this project, and driving my imagination. And I hope it will drive you too. But yeah, just I guess in closing, just get ready for the writing process. Keep an eye out for posts and interactions and everything. And I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope it cleared some things up for you. And I hope you're as excited as I am. Until next time, guys, we'll see you later.